glad you all made it. Thank you so much. If you enjoy the show, guess what? I got some good news. We got brand new shows starting the first weekend in April. So the repeats will be over. We're out making new shows as we speak. As a matter of fact, I got one done. That's one done. I guess when we start these shows, I'm going to be out making shows. I've been doing these sports expos and doing some tournament fishing and having a lot of fun with it. But my crew is like, hey, it's time to get out and make some shows. You're on the deadline heat right now. Let me tell you. Fox Sports Arizona every Sunday at 9:30 in the morning. And of course, you can also catch my show during the week, but a new show plays every Sunday. And I'll tell you what, we're going into our 19th season. I can't believe how much the time has flown by. I've been on my website checking out fishingwithjohnnyjohnson.com and seeing some of the old shows that I did back when I didn't eat so many chips, or when I did, it didn't matter. I don't know. I'll tell you, I looked like a stud back then. I don't know what happened to me now, but age caught up with me, I guess. But I've still had a lot of fun showing you all these different techniques and things on these waters that we have to fish. And I will say this, if you can fish in Arizona, you can fish anywhere across the United States and catch fish. Arizona's a tough state to catch fish in. Maybe that's the only reason I'm probably one of the only ones in the area that does a show. It's just tough. But hopefully we're helping you learn how to catch these fish here locally. And that's something I want to talk to you about today. We're going into the spring. What happens in the spring? The fish move shallow into the backs of coves. And I was just at Apache Lake the other day. I had a guide trip out there, had a lot of fun with the Arizona fishing guides, and the fish are moving up in the shallows. I'm going to show you a few baits that I really love to throw during the spring that a lot of other fishermen like to throw too, but man, these baits are almost key for this time of year. One of them is a super fluke, and I also like to throw a bass assassin, something in a shad or a bluegill color. Now remember, when these fish move shallow, what they're going to do is start really keeping things away when they build a nest for spawning. Try to keep those bluegill away or the crawdads away or anything like that. So shallow fishing's a lot of fun. If you keep yourself shallow, your chances of catching those bass are a lot easier. You don't want to be fishing 60 foot of water, which I did at Lake Pleasant in January to catch those fish. But anyways, what I like to do, it's a soft jerk bait that I like to throw. And basically what you're doing is trying to make this thing look like an injured minnow or something that's dying or injured. And these fish really react on it. Now these fish have seen a lot of lures in the tank, but here's the ticket with this particular bait. This particular bait, you want to work slow and you want to let it fall like it's dying. So you throw it out there. I'm throwing it on light line. Even though I'm using bait cast equipment, for this bait to really fall and work really nice, I like a 10-pound or a 12-pound test fluorocarbon line. You don't want a real stiff line for this bait, okay? You want it to fall naturally as you twitch it. And you're just making short little twitches on the rod tip to make this thing work in the water. And what ends up happening a lot of times is it's a reaction for the fish when they see something dying or something that's injured. It's easy prey. And with easy prey, a lot of times comes the big old strike. And the bigger the bass, they love to find that easy prey stuff. So, but a lot of times too, when they're up in the shallows like that and they're making beds, this thing starts falling down into a nest or something, and they just come up and destroy it thinking it's a fish trying to get in on the nest or something. So what they'll do is just come up and just hammer this bait. But a lot of times what I'll do this early in the season, if you don't see the fish really scattering after shad and things like that along the bank, is I'll take this bait and I'll just fish it real slow like that. You can cover a lot of water, believe it or not, with a bait like this. You make long parallel casts to the bank. You know, keep your boat out in 5 or 10 foot of water, make some long parallel casts, put yourself in the strike zone, and basically just twitch this thing in really slow. And this bait works on all the lakes in the state. From Lake Pleasant, one of my favorite lakes to throw this at is Lake Pleasant. So you'll have a lot of fun with a bait like this. But you want to use a good rod, and I use Taipan rods. You're going to start seeing those on the show. It's what I won that tournament with. It's a total graphite rod. You can really feel everything. A medium action rod, and with that 12-pound test line, and I'll use a fast retrieve ratio reel, and I'm barely tapping the reel a little bit, and I'm using the rod. I'm always using that rod tip to make that thing react. Now, I've said this a lot of times, and you've heard me say it on the show, that a bait has to have attracting and triggering qualities for a fish to really want it. So a lot of times the attracting quality is the beautiful way they make them look, and they make them look like a little fish or something like that, and the colors that they laminate in them and put in them. And then you're the one that's got to make this one work. Throw it out there, let it fall. Sometimes they'll hit it on the fall like it's dying. But if you twitch it, when you go to twitch it, it looks like it's trying to survive. So a lot of times they'll go ahead and think that it's dying or it's trying to survive or get away, and then they're going to get it. Now, in the late spring, what they'll do is they'll start busting shad along the banks and things like that. They'll see balls of shad coming in. What I'll do is I'll take that bait and I'll throw it out there during the summer, and I'll work it kind of fast. I'll just kind of jerk it and work it kind of fast like it's something trying to run away. But when you make that pause is when that fish usually decides to hit it. Or if it's trying to run away, when you start it up again, the fish will come back and hit it. But this is a really fun bait to throw. This time of year, it's real easy. You can get 3 odd wide gap hooks, you know, and go out and try those. And I'll tell you what, use a wide gap on this, because when you use a wide gap hook on that, it gets through that thick plastic, and that way you get a lot of the hook into the fish instead of not catching the fish. So definitely make sure that you get the right size hook for the right size bait that you use. If I'm using a B.A.S.S Assassin, a B.A.S.S Assassin has a lot thicker plastic around, and so what I'll do is I'll use a 5/0 wide gap hook. But you want to use a medium action rod, and that'll help you a lot in working the bait to the boat. All right. One of the other baits I love to throw this time of year when they go shallow is a square bill crankbait. I'm sure you've all heard that, the square bill crankbait. It's just a little tiny crankbait that looks like the end of the lip has been filed off flat, okay? And what it does, it's made for shallow water. And you know, as Matt was saying earlier, it's good to bump things with your crankbaits. These crankbaits here are made to run from 0 to 3 foot of water, 4 foot of water, something like that, if you get a long enough cast. And you want to bump the bottom. So if you're not hitting the bottom and you're fishing deeper water, if you hear somebody's catching them on square bills, you don't want to be, you know, fishing 40 foot of water with a square bill unless they're suspended or something like that, and you know that. But a lot of times you want to be able to hit the bottom. And so when you throw the bait out there a lot of times, and I fish fast, and you all know this if you watch my show, I get a little excited. So I'm an excited type of guy, and I like to fish fast. So I always make sure that I buy the retrieve ratio reels that work great for me. I like a 4.8 to 1 or something really slow for my crankbaiting, because I have a tendency to go down the bank pretty fast, and it'll slow my fishing down a little bit and let that crankbait work, because I know how I am. So I have a tough time throwing a crankbait on a real fast retrieve ratio reel when I'm trying to make it, you know, bump the bottom and grind the bottom a little bit. Unless you got to dig it down there, I'll use a slower retrieve, and it works a lot better. Now, for this bait to hit the maximum depth, you want to hit about 10-pound test line on these, if you can get away with it. The lighter the line, obviously, the better, but you don't want to use 8-pound on a bait caster too much, because there's a lot of stretch in your line. Or fluorocarbon's one of the reasons I do like throwing that, because it doesn't have a lot of stretch. But still, between the medium action rod that you're using, and then of course the line, you still have those little hooks you got to try to put into the fish. So you want to go with about a 10-pound test line, and it'll work just great in the shallows. But here's the deal. You want it to hit bottom. So if you throw the crankbait out there and you're not hitting bottom, find one that will. But with these square bills, you start making a dirt trail almost as you're reeling them in. And what they do is they start hitting the bottom, ricocheting off rocks, things like that, and you get a reaction strike out of the fish, okay? And the one thing I've always said is, if you have a fish following it, and say you're not getting bit that much, sometimes you can put your own action to these baits. Sometimes I'll stop and twitch the bait and almost give it a jerk bait type action or something like that to get those fish to react on it. Or a lot of times what ends up happening is you'll have the fish actually following your bait. And what ends up happening is, if you stop the bait and it stops sudden like that, the fish is swimming right up on it, he's got his nose right up on it, what's he do? He's either got to eat it or he's going to run into it, right? Because fish don't have hands. So fish are very curious, and they react on things, and they have to use their mouth to touch and feel everything. So that's the thing that's real key with this kind of bait, is if you're digging up the bottom, you can almost be guaranteed when you hit one of those big rocks or something like that, or a stump or something like that down there, it'll ricochet off there. The bass might be sitting there, see it flash, and they rip it right there. They love that reaction stuff. They love anything that actually ricochets off anything. There's not a whole lot to throw on the crankbaits. It's a lot of fun. You can just throw it out there and reel it in. The only thing I will say is you don't want to be using a pull cue. And what I mean by that is a real heavy rod. You don't want a real heavy rod. You want to use a medium action rod for something like this. Something that's got a good little flimsy tip on it, because you're going to have little hooks on it, and you don't want to rip the hooks out of the fish, and you want the fish to have an opportunity to fight and inhale the bait. Because a lot of times when you're reeling this bait in, what ends up happening is the fish flares its gills and inhales the bait. And if you had a real stiff rod, a lot of times you'll feel that, but you'll rip the bait out of the fish before it gets a chance to inhale it, and your tip will actually take the slack up a little bit and allow the fish to inhale it really good, so you can get that fish to the boat. So always remember that. Your equipment's very important, what you use. But the square bills are a lot of fun. And like I said, if you're not burning bottom with a square bill this time of year up in the flats where the fish move up into the flats, I like a shad color with a little chartreuse like this here, or anything in a crawdad, or again, a bluegill color. The bass can't stand bluegill this time of year. They don't want them around them. They're gonna smack those bluegill when they get up in the shallows and they're trying to make beds. And that's a fun bait to throw.